Dr. Betsy, and we are here with another episode of Body, Mind, Spirit. I am very excited because I'm going to give you a sneak peek behind the scenes of some project I've been working on. We've been working on a new podcast that's coming out called Pleasure Forever. So just in time for Valentine's Day, I figured I'd give you some sneak peek behind the scenes of what we've been working on. Here we go.
I'm Marissa Nelson, licensed marriage and family therapist, a sex-certified sex therapist and sexuality educator, and all things couples and sex therapy. I got started doing this work because I've always loved couples. I think I used to grow up watching Sex and the City, and I wanted to be like the Black Carrie Bradshaw, to be honest. But I also would look at magazines and be like, this advice is really awful. Like, what would happen if it was a lot more inclusive, if it really gave women the tips and the support that they need, not to just use sexuality to get a man, to keep a partner, or in service to someone else, but like, what if women really got the tools that they need so they can have the most pleasurable, embodied, erotic experience that they deserve? And that's why I'm here. What about you, Betsy?
Yeah, so I'm Dr. Betsy Greenleaf. I'm the first board certified female urogynecologist. And so I got here kind of a long way. I knew that I was always interested in medicine and helping people, but gynecology was the last thing on my list because I was like, who wants to look at that all day long? And I found out that when you go through medical school, you kind of become desensitized to things. So after a while, I just love taking care of women and women's issues and supporting women. And from a standpoint of gynecology, I realized that even myself having my own pelvic issues, that this was such an underserved area and that there wasn't a lot of information. And with pelvic health also goes sexual health. And there's not a lot of people talking about it, or if they are talking about it, it's a lot of misinformation. Right. So it was one of those things where I'm like, all right, I want to be one of those people that help support women so they don't have to live in shame and embarrassment, because a lot of the things that are going on in your head are going on in other people's heads. That's very, very common. So, and I'm so excited that we're joining forces because this is like a key combination. So
it really is the best, because I think blending both of our worlds, I think that it's the stuff that women do need to know, because we run the continuum. I think one of the reasons why we say pleasure forever is because it's not just going into your OB's office. It's not just going for your yearly checkup. It's what's happening as our body is changing through the life cycle. And how does that impact our relationships, our relationship with our body, our sexual health, our sexual self-esteem, and the way in which we're doing intimacy for ourselves and for our partners. So it's really important for you to know, how do I get the tools that I need to be more proactive and an advocate for my own sexual satisfaction and my sexual health? And this gal, Dr. Betsy, is definitely the one who's going to give you the most amazing, amazing tips and advice so that you know what to do in your daily life so that you can have your vagina be there forever as well.
And you know what? It's so fun that you actually said the word vagina, because there was a study that was done not too long ago that said 65% of women are unable to say that word without feeling extremely uncomfortable. And I always say, well, if we don't talk about it, how are we going to heal? How are we going to ask for help? And 80% of women will have a pelvic health condition at some point in their lives. So we have to talk about it. We got to be using the words.
But people feel uncomfortable saying vagina. I was just thinking about clients in my own practice, because let's take it back to messages that we got growing up. Yeah. Much of how we feel about our sexuality, about our body parts, came from childhood and the belief systems, our cultural values, everything, even what it means to own our own gender and our own bodies. But if everybody around us was uncomfortable talking about sex or addressing our vagina and our labia and all of the parts in a real, honest, open way, then wouldn't we feel like, oh, I can't say vagina? When we feel a little awkward saying that. So everybody walks around calling it like my box, my this, my hoo-ha, my all of these things. But then when we really have sexual health concerns and we go to a doctor and we're saying, listen, are you feeling pain during sex? Yes. Where do you feel it? In my vagina. And when actually you're really feeling burning in your vulva, or actually you're feeling something else, right? So these terms are really important so that we can support you in getting where you need to go and feeling better and getting any of your medical issues taken care of.
Just curious, when you were growing up, what did people around you refer to down there as?
Down there. And even like now, what does my mom say? I think my mom calls it pocketbook. Speaking of which, this is my mom calling. So it's like pocketbook, lady, Pikachu, all of these. And then my clients call it patients call it various different things based on like, whatever they grew up with. What about you?
My grandmother used to call it your business.
Oh,
and the funny thing is, I remember back then, like I grew up in the 70s and stuff, and they were really big. My grandmother was really big about using like baby powder. And so you would like get out of the bathtub or get out of the shower.
You would do baby powder. Us too, us Caribbeans do. Caribbean people love baby powder. We love baby powder.
My grandmother used to always be like, did you sugar your business? I'm like, what are you talking about?
Literally, when I was little, like I would take a shower, it's like a cloud of like baby powder. Like shake it up like a cloud of baby powder. We used to put it everywhere. You definitely put it in your private parts.
Yeah. Yeah. And now I will tell you, there was a lot of stuff that went on a couple of years ago, and like Johnson & Johnson got sued for like bazillions of dollars because of connecting talcum powder with ovarian cancer. I'm just going to kind of say something really quickly about that. Is in the medical community, we've known for years, even before that lawsuit, that there was a relationship between talcum powder and ovarian cancer, but you were not able to like find out if it's causative, meaning that they, found ovarian cancers, and in the ovarian cancers, they found pieces of talc. But the question is like, does it actually cause the cancer? And I got some mixed feelings about that. It's possible because we know that talc is an irritant, and anything that is irritant can cause cancer. But as I digress.
No, but it's important to know because there's a lot of people who do like baby powder or even use it for their own children. So, what happens if you're the mom who wants to use it once or twice? Would you recommend that or shy away from it altogether? Or is this with regular use?
I think in some ways you could use cornstarch based powders, but even with cornstarch, the starches can feed yeast. I think the biggest thing is to try to put it on the outside of the lips or in the groin area, not get it into the moist areas of the inner labia or into the opening. I think that would be the best. Keep it as external as possible would be the best thing to do.
80% of women will develop a pelvic health condition at some point in their lives. There is relief. There is hope. The Pelvic Floor Store, your resource for personal health.
And what are you, how are you experiencing pleasure, and how are you, reimagining intimacy for you? So I'm just curious, like in your line of work, Dr. Betsy, do you see clients who may be using, we talked about talcum powder. Are they using other things on their vaginas that they come to you to help support them with?
I have seen people use a lot of different things, especially from a lubrication standpoint.
Yes.
Because, we need lubrication to help with the friction of intercourse, because without it, it can be quite uncomfortable. And, oh my God, we could probably go on forever about lubrication, but there's, this misbelief that lubrication equals sexual arousal. And, I think sometimes there's this misunderstanding from partners that like, oh, you're not that wet down there. Maybe you're not that into me. When really lubrication is a blood flow issue. And if 75% of us are chronically dehydrated, if you don't have enough fluids in your body, you're not going to make enough fluids down below either. So,
you see the celebration emoji. Can you please tell more? Because I hear that all the time, especially with couples feeling inadequate because their partner is not lubricated. Number one, we have to find ways to also warm up the body. So many times we want to just like skip into the intercourse, but we're not we're not focusing on what we would call outer course. We're not focusing on ways that we can really get to desire, turn on the body, have a little bit more, lubrication, or even if you need more, lubricant, because as we move through our sexual cycle, as we move through the life cycle, we may have some hormones that get in the way. It may impact lubrication as well, right? If you just had a baby, you might have some vaginal dryness. If you are going through menopause, you may have a little bit of vaginal dryness as well. So I want this to kind of be a springboard for us to start having more conversations instead of saying, oh my gosh, I'm not lubricated as much, or partners feeling offended by it. How could we have a larger conversation about what do we need? What do I need in order for me to, I hear you saying, Dr. Betsy, drink more water and be a little bit more hydrated. And, number two, how do we just have these conversations with our partners so that we can talk to them like this has nothing to do with you? Maybe we should come up with a certain style together so that we can, get to an erotic place where we can do new things together, where we can start to rediscover sexuality, and it has nothing to do with how much lubrication I have.
Yeah, no, and you know what the funny thing is with natural lubrications, a lot of people think it's like mucus when actually it's a blood product. Because what happens is when a woman is sexually excited, there's a lot more blood flow down in the pelvis, and that pressure from that blood flow actually causes the walls of the vagina to weep. Mm-hmm. And that lubricant is, actually almost like a plasma, like from the blood. So
it's like a condensation.
Yes. So yeah. Condensation makes it sound much better than a weeping vagina. Your vagina's crying.
It's a condensation from the blood flow, right?
Yes, I like that. That's much better. But that with that, sometimes having issues with your own lubrication could be the first sign of heart disease. With men, they get erectile dysfunction, and women, they may have more issues with dryness because the blood is not getting to the vagina the way it should.
So, how does that tend to work? Because I'm thinking about many of the clients and patients that I work with. How might that work when, for example, again, they might just have had a baby and there's hormones that are at play that are, maybe off whack, or maybe, interfering with the natural blood flow that's usually available to them?
Well, in the conditions where people have less hormones, like less estrogen because they've just have had a baby, or they've been on birth control, or they're menopausal, you need that estrogen to keep that vaginal tissue thick and healthy, and also to support the blood vessels coming into the vagina. And so what happens is when we have a lack of those things, because the lack of estrogen, you get a retraction of those blood vessels. So the blood is actually kind of not getting to the area. If we're talking just the hormonal conditions.
Yeah. And then if you're not getting as much lubrication as you would like to, that also leads to discomfort during sex as well, and intercourse, because I know that many times if you're not having adequate lubrication and you go ahead and have, intercourse, that might cause a little bit of vaginal tearing, that can cause discomfort and pain. I know in my perspective and in my work, this is kind of what starts to cause some sexual avoidance, because if I associate sex with being painful, or being uncomfortable, then I'm less likely to want to have sex. I'm less likely to want to engage in intimacy, which then makes me pull or makes partners pull away from any cues or, responding to any bids for affection, attention, or closeness. And so, again, this is another reason why you see the link between what's happening in your sexual health and what happens in your intimacy. Because if you feel uncomfortable, if you're not having that, if you're not being able to feel pleasure during the experience or have adequate blood flow or lubrication, then you may not want to have as much intimacy as you desire. That's what I see. What about you, Dr.?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've even experienced this myself, I will tell you, because it's like, why do something that hurts? That's like, the body and the brain wants to avoid pain. So
At
if
all
we're
costs.
doing something that's, painful, it's not going to reinforce that behavior. So, yeah. And then it becomes this vicious cycle. And then what I see from a medical standpoint is a lot of women subconsciously tighten their pelvic floor muscles to splint against pain. Well,
and
that
and then it starts vaginismus.
More pain. Yeah.
And it causes more pain. So then the psycho, the feedback that the body is getting, if the mind believes, sex is painful, sex has been historically painful for me. And then you go to have sex, and many of the times that you do have intercourse, it is a bit painful, and it is a self-reinforcing cycle, unfortunately. And we see things like vaginismus. Vaginismus is really, I call it the vagina having a panic attack. It's when the pelvic walls just close so tight that it's very hard to have anything penetrate. And that causes incredible amount of discomfort and dis-ease. You can see a whole bunch of other sexual issues that show up as well, pelvic pain and such, because if you don't feel relaxed, again, intimacy, sexuality, especially for women or those that identify as women, is something that is a space that is about surrender. It is a place where it's about relaxation and feeling embodied. And what I mean by the word embodied is like, how do I allow myself to be present in body, mind, spirit with my partner, whoever I choose to open myself up to? How can I really enjoy the experience and the pleasure that's happening in my body without kind of like oscillating attention and really allowing myself to feel all my feels? When that doesn't happen, then we start to pull away from intimacy altogether, which is one of the reasons why we even wanted to do this podcast, because we want you, by our advice, our wisdom, our clients, our patients, learn from everything that we know so that you can have the best intimacy ever and the best relationship with you, because it's not just about your partner. You're taking everything that we're saying and you want to have the best relationship with you so that you know what you need and you know how to build a bridge and a pathway to help your partner get you and understand you.
Awesome. So I hope you enjoyed that. That is a sneak peek of Pleasure Forever podcast coming out soon. Make sure you follow me on social media, on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, all the above, because we'll be announcing when that podcast will be available. But you guys are getting to watch it here first before it's even released. And don't forget to visit WITV7.org. Visit the website, check out all the other amazing podcasts and shows that are going on. And while you're there, please hit the donate button, because that gives us the ability to support other community events, scholarships, and bring great programming like this today. See you next week for another episode of Body, Mind, Spirit.